One of the greatest misconceptions about kindness is that helping someone is always the right thing to do. We grow up believing that if someone asks for support, the compassionate response is to immediately say yes. While that sounds noble, life has a way of revealing a more uncomfortable truth. Not every act of help creates healing. Sometimes what appears to be kindness becomes the very reason another person never grows. This is where wisdom must guide compassion. Think about nature for a moment. A bird cannot learn to fly if someone carries it through the sky forever. A tree cannot develop deep roots if it is constantly protected from every gust of wind. Growth requires effort, discomfort, and responsibility. Human beings are no different. Every challenge we overcome strengthens something within us. Every problem we solve ourselves builds confidence, resilience, and maturity. But when another person repeatedly removes those challenges, that growth never takes place. There are people who unconsciously make a habit of depending on others. They don't necessarily intend to manipulate, but they have become comfortable allowing someone else to carry the weight of their decisions. Every crisis becomes someone else's responsibility. Every mistake is blamed on circumstances, family, society, or bad luck. They rarely stop to ask, "What could I have done differently?" because someone is always there to rescue them before self-reflection becomes necessary. Psychology teaches us that repeated rescue can reinforce helplessness. When people learn that someone will always fix the consequences of their actions, the mind slowly loses the motivation to develop new solutions. Responsibility weakens because dependency becomes rewarding. Without realizing it, both people become trapped in an unhealthy cycle. One continues to save, while the other continues to rely. This is why it is important to recognize the difference between someone who genuinely needs support and someone who has become attached to being saved. The first person appreciates guidance and uses it to move forward. The second keeps returning with the same problem, not because solutions don't exist, but because accepting responsibility feels more difficult than asking for help again. You may have experienced this in your own life. Perhaps you've offered advice countless times, lent money repeatedly, solved the same conflict over and over, or invested hours trying to motivate someone who has no intention of changing. At first, it feels compassionate. Eventually, however, you notice something surprising. They are not becoming stronger. You are simply becoming more exhausted. This is where boundaries become an act of love rather than rejection. Saying no is not always withholding kindness. Sometimes it is giving another person the opportunity to discover their own strength. Real support does not remove every obstacle from someone's path. Instead, it encourages them to develop the courage, discipline, and wisdom to walk through those obstacles themselves. The philosophy behind this is simple but profound. We are not responsible for carrying another person's life. We are responsible for offering guidance without taking away their responsibility. There is a quiet confidence in knowing when to step forward and when to step back. That discernment protects both your energy and the dignity of the other person. Helping someone should never mean living their life for them. The highest form of compassion is not rescuing people from every consequence. It is believing they are capable of rising to meet those consequences themselves. Remember this. When your kindness removes responsibility, it weakens. When it inspires responsibility, it transforms. If we continue this idea a little further, we begin to see that not everyone who asks for help is simply struggling. Some people have learned how to use the goodness of others as a resource. They recognize empathy, patience, and generosity not as qualities to respect, but as opportunities to exploit. This is why protecting your energy is not about becoming cold or suspicious. It is about becoming conscious. Many people believe that being a good person means always being available. They feel guilty when they say no. They fear disappointing others more than they fear exhausting themselves. But guilt is not always a reliable guide. Sometimes guilt appears precisely because you are breaking an unhealthy pattern. When you've spent years putting everyone else's needs before your own, choosing yourself for the first time can feel uncomfortable. Yet discomfort does not mean you are doing something wrong. Often, it means you are finally doing something different. One of the most common patterns you will encounter is emotional manipulation. It is rarely loud or obvious. More often, it is subtle. Someone reminds you of everything they have done for you, hoping you will feel obligated. Someone constantly portrays themselves as the victim, so you hesitate to establish boundaries. Someone reacts with anger, silence, or disappointment whenever you refuse their requests. Their goal may not always be conscious, but the result is the same. They want your decisions to be driven by their emotions instead of your wisdom. This is where emotional intelligence becomes essential. Emotional intelligence is not simply understanding other people's feelings. It is also understanding your own. It is recognizing when compassion is genuine and when it is being pulled by fear, guilt, or the desire to be accepted. If your kindness is motivated by the fear of losing approval, then it is no longer freely given. It has become a transaction between your peace of mind and someone else's expectations. There is another kind of person you should be careful with, the one who consistently takes but rarely gives. Relationships naturally go through seasons. Sometimes one person needs more support than the other. That is normal, but over time, healthy relationships find balance. There is mutual respect, gratitude, and consideration. In unhealthy relationships, however, the flow only moves in one direction. They call when they need advice. They reach out when they need money. They remember you when they need comfort. But when your life becomes difficult, they are nowhere to be found. At some point, you have to ask yourself a difficult question. Are you helping because it creates growth, or because you are afraid of what will happen if you stop? That single question reveals more truth than almost any other. If your absence creates anger instead of understanding, perhaps your value was never in who you are, but only in what you provide. The deeper philosophical lesson is that every human being teaches others how to treat them. Every time you ignore your own limits, you silently communicate that your boundaries are negotiable. Every time you sacrifice your well-being to avoid disappointing someone, you reinforce a pattern that becomes increasingly difficult to escape. Respect begins long before another person offers it. It begins with the standards you quietly uphold for yourself. Protecting your energy is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of stewardship. Your attention, your time, and your emotional strength are among the most valuable resources you possess. Once they are scattered without discernment, there is very little left for your own growth, your loved ones, or the people who truly appreciate your presence. The wisest people are not those who help everyone. They are those who know where their help can create transformation and where it merely feeds unhealthy dependence or manipulation. Compassion without awareness becomes exhaustion. Compassion guided by wisdom becomes strength. Never feel guilty for protecting the peace that allows your kindness to remain genuine. As we bring these ideas together, we arrive at perhaps the most important realization of all. The purpose of helping another human being is not to make them dependent on your strength. It is to awaken their own. There is a profound difference between solving someone's problems and empowering them to solve those problems themselves. One creates temporary relief. The other creates lasting transformation. This distinction is often overlooked because immediate results can be deceiving. It feels satisfying to step in, fix a situation, and watch someone's burden disappear. It gives us a sense of purpose, and sometimes even a sense of identity. But if that same person returns with the same patterns, the same excuses, and the same unwillingness to change, then what was actually accomplished? The problem may have disappeared for a moment, but the mindset that created it remained untouched. This is why you should be cautious with people who reject every solution yet continue to complain. You may spend hours listening, encouraging, and offering practical advice, only to discover that every suggestion is met with another excuse. They are not looking for clarity, they are looking for comfort. They are not searching for a way forward. They are searching for someone who will validate staying exactly where they are. There is an important psychological principle behind this. People change when they become emotionally committed to change, not when someone else becomes emotionally invested in changing them. No amount of wisdom can transform a person who has decided to protect their habits instead of challenging them. Growth is always an inside job. Others may inspire it, encourage it, or support it, but they cannot force it. The same wisdom applies to those who repeatedly betray your trust and then expect unlimited chances without genuine accountability. Forgiveness is a beautiful quality. It frees your heart from resentment and allows you to move forward with peace. But forgiveness should never be confused with abandoning discernment. If someone continually breaks promises, ignores your boundaries, or takes advantage of your goodwill without showing consistent change, continuing to help them in the same way is not compassion. It is the refusal to learn from experience. True kindness is never blind. It sees people clearly while still wishing them well. It recognizes that everyone deserves dignity, but not everyone deserves unlimited access to your time, energy, or resources. Sometimes the greatest respect you can show another person is allowing them to face the consequences that life has prepared for them. Those consequences are often the very lessons capable of creating genuine transformation. There is also a deeper lesson for ourselves. We often measure our worth by how much we give. We believe that if we are always needed, then we are valuable. But your value has never depended on being someone's rescuer. Your value exists independently of how much you sacrifice. When you understand this, your relationships begin to change. You no longer give because you fear rejection. You give because your heart is full, your mind is clear, and your boundaries are strong. Notice how peaceful that feels. You stop chasing appreciation from people who only notice you when they need something. Instead, you naturally invest your time in those who demonstrate humility, responsibility, gratitude, and a sincere willingness to grow. These are the relationships that multiply kindness instead of consuming it. Your energy becomes an investment rather than an endless expense. Ultimately, wisdom is not about helping less. It is about helping better. It is about understanding that compassion reaches its highest expression when it inspires independence rather than dependence, responsibility rather than excuses, and growth rather than comfort. When your actions encourage others to discover their own resilience, your kindness becomes a force that continues long after you have stepped away. So, as you leave here today, remember this simple truth. Every time you choose wisdom over guilt, you protect not only your own peace, but also the possibility of another person's growth. ***, the greatest help you can offer is not your strength. It is the courage to let others discover theirs. ***.